All right, today we're going to talk about your project, what it entails, the rubric, and before we get into that, we're going to look at what's called bias in statistical studies. And these are some things that we need to be aware of and um, try to minimize these as much as possible. Um, So once we collect our data, write a research question, then collect our data, analyze and interpret it, we want to write a conclusion. And the final step of writing conclusion is basically to say, like, so once we found this, were there anything in there in our data collection that may have been, um, may have provided some type of implication or limitation in our study, like giving um, an idea for further studies and what we might want to try to minimize moving forward. So, the final step in our statistical study involves summarizing the findings and discussing implications, limitations, and potential avenues for future research. And I just had that same thing twice. So, we're going to look at what's called bias, which is the tendency of a statistic to overestimate or underestimate a parameter. And what that basically means is, like, we have different type of bias, and when we say something or we make a claim, like, how reliable is that claim? Like, who are we talking to? Did we uh, disclude anybody of our population from our sample that may have provided good evidence for us moving forward? So we're going to look at the types of statistical bias. The first one being an exclusion bias, and that occurs when part of your population is excluded from the sampling process. So this would be an example. Suppose a group of friends decides to conduct a survey on their school to find out which social media platform is the most popular among students. They send out the poll via a group chat on a messaging app like WhatsApp or Snapchat, which only includes their close friends. In this case, the survey is limited to only those who use that specific messaging platform and are part of their friend group and thus excluded part of the population, the student body. So if you really wanted to provide strong evidence, you would include more than just that. You wouldn't exclude somebody from the sample survey. Another one is called another type of bias is the non-response bias, which occurs when certain people chosen for a survey or study don't respond. Their lack of their lack of response affects the overall results. This can lead to conclusions that don't accurately reflect the view or behaviors of the entire group. This would be me. I am a non-response type of person. I do not really respond to those. So imagine your school decides to conduct a survey to find out what students think about cafeteria food. They randomly select 100 students to participate in the survey. However, only 50 students respond. In short, if a certain group of students, like those who are indifferent, doesn't respond, the results of the survey may not accurately represent how all students feel about cafeteria food. Another type of bias is voluntary response occurs when individuals select themselves or volunteer for the sample, which can lead to skewed results. Imagine Byron Nelson is conducting a survey to understand student opinions on a new dress code policy. If only students who are very passionate about the dress code, either for or against, choose to participate, their responses might not reflect the views of all student views. Think about this also about like the political stuff that is going on right now. It's like if you were to do a political poll and all you do is poll one side or the other, your views are going to be very different. Like, and also people can volunteer for that because they're passionate about certain issues from one side to the next. Another type of bias might be a response bias. This refers to the tendency of respondents to answer questions in a certain way that does not accurately reflect their true feelings, beliefs, or knowledge. This can happen for a variety of reasons, such as wanting to please others, social pressure, or misunderstanding the question. I have a few examples that I'm going to talk about with this. I find it interesting. So consider a school survey asking students about their substance abuse, such as alcohol or marijuana. The survey might ask, how many times in the past month have you used alcohol? Many students might underreport their use due to fear of getting in trouble, wanting to appear more responsible, or wanting to affirm that their peers that they engage wanting to affirm that their peers that they engage in these activities. I don't think that was a complete sentence, but either way. So these are some things that you need to consider and write up with in your conclusion. So if you have something like this with one of your samples, you need to address this as you go forward, and try to eliminate as many biases as possible. Consider this types of statistical bias. This is another response bias. So suppose two surveys ask Catholics whether birth control should be made available to unmarried women. Why might this be important? Well, I mean, if you think about Catholics being a religious organization and birth control being made to unmarried women, they might have some type of moral ethics that they want to consider. So the first involved an in-person interview, and 40% of the respondents answered, yes, I think that birth control should be made available to unmarried women, which is less than half. Right? In the second survey, these are the same study, just two different methods of conducting the same survey. The second survey was conducted by mail and telephone, where 75% of the respondents answered yes. So both of them are giving us statistics in which they both answered yes. One is a lot different than the other. And why might that be? Well, which of these two surveys was more accurate and why? I think that when we look at moral issues like this with religious organizations and having birth control made to unmarried women, I think if you're a religious person, which is immoral with premarital sex and things like that, um, you might be more tempted to lie face to face because of fear of what somebody might think of you and being judged. But if you're doing it by mail or telephone, you might be a little more open to that. Here's another one. Suppose you write two versions of a question for a poll. The first one is, you can ask people whether the government is spending too much on assistance for the poor or if they're spending too much on welfare. These two questions, by the way, say the same exact thing. They're just different wording. One is saying assistance to the poor, one is saying welfare. Which one of these has the higher percent of those saying yes? Meaning spending too much on welfare or assisting the poor. Well, welfare is a political term. And that goes with Republicans and Democrats alike. But when you talk about spending too much on assisting the poor, you kind of sound like a jerk when you say that. So wording is important with statistical type of questions. So spending too much on welfare, I would say, would give the higher percent of people saying yes. Because if you say something like spending too much on assisting the poor, you sound kind of like a jerk. Okay, let's talk about your rubric real quick and go through kind of some of the stuff. First and foremost, I'm only going to say this once. All slides should not be black and white. They should have a catchy background. Use Canva or Google Slides, but make it nice and engaging. The first slide is the title slide. What needs to be included on that is all your group members' names, your class period, your title of your project, and some type of visual or picture that is engaging and appropriate for your project. Your second slide, you can go and see the points for all of these, is an intro slide. You need to write your null hypothesis, state your research question, your motivation, which is why you chose this topic, who is your population, and what did you think that you would find. Your data collection, what did you do to try to get a truly random sample? Briefly describe how you collected your data. How many samples did you end up with? Remember, you must have a minimum of 30 for each group. Did you remove any responsive from your analysis? And add a slide after this and include pictures of your experiment or observation. So if you did a survey, you don't have to do this. But if you did an experiment or observation, I want to see pictures of that experiment or observation. Your analysis and interpretation, this is your chi-square to t-test. Create visuals using Google Sheets, side-by-side bar graphs, and categorical and 2 histograms for quantitative data. Describes descriptive statistics, meaning mean, median, standard deviation, max, and min of each group for quantitative data only. If you're using categorical, organize your data in a two-way table and list the p-value and interpret its meaning like we've seen a couple times with this unit. And then slide 5, you're going to write a conclusion. Summarize your research in simple terms. What did the data tell you about the population you were researching? Limitations. What issues did you have with your analysis? Possible things to address. Was there any bias in your sample? Did your data fail? Any assumptions? Can you think of any confounding variables that you didn't control for? Or were there any other issues you ran into during the data collection? Remember that every study has issues, even published ones. This is not making you lose points for mentioning stuff like that. Implications. What recommendations do you have for people based on your study? What audience might be interested in your results? What might they tell people based on your results? These are some things that you need to be talking about in your slides for your rubric. Furthermore, you need to share your slides with me and uncheck the notify me box. Copy the shared link and post it into Canvas in the submission box. And have fun with the project. I like this project. I hope you do too. And good luck.